Welcome back, this is Luca, and today we're gonna speculate a lot. It was late 2023 when I released this video over here in which I was giving you my speculation, expectations, wishes for what the new X-Pro camera had to be a success. Because I thought back then that the camera had to be behind the corner, had to be launched pretty soon, probably the first half of 2024. I was totally wrong with the launch date. I couldn't have been more wrong than that. Back then, I predicted the new X-Pro camera was going to be a 40 megapixel camera with a stabilized sensor. It was going to get rid of the screen of the X-Pro3 for a more normal screen that would tilt up and down and eventually even sideways, very much like the X-E5. And it was going to get rid of the hybrid viewfinder in its entirety. It was going to become a electronic viewfinder only with a top-of-the-line viewfinder. I call that type of camera basically an X-E-Pro rather than an X-Pro camera. None of that happened on the X-Pro camera, but that vast majority of that happened with the new X-E5, because the new X-E5 has all of that except for a higher-end viewfinder and the weather sealing. So that camera that I wanted Fujifilm to make was basically made in the form of the X-E5. And so, given the presence of the X-E5 as is, my expectation for the new X-Pro camera have shifted pretty dramatically because the camera has to be a lot more. But we're gonna get to that in a second. Before doing that, this video is brought to you by PGYTech, and more specifically by the PGYTech card reader case that you're seeing on the screen right now. This product serves both as a card reader for CF Express Type A and SD cards, but you get provided also with an adapter for micro SD, so you can actually read micro SD, SD, and CF Express Type A cards, but also as a case in which you can store your memory cards. So you can put everything in here and always have with you the reader, but also the memory that you need. You can store 3 CF Express Type A cards, 3 SD cards, 4 micro SD cards, and 2 SIM slots as well, because you get provided not only with the adapter for the micro SD cards, but you also get provided with the pin to remove the SIM card from your phone. It is rugged, it is fairly compact, it is very, very efficient when it comes to transferring files. With both my MacBook Air M3 and my Mac Mini M4 Pro that I use every day, basically, the transfer speed for this thing is being super fast and super reliable. It doesn't overheat and it doesn't create any issue with incompatibility with some ports like other readers showed in the past. It is compact, it is lightweight, it is rugged as I mentioned, and this is gonna serve you incredibly well and it's gonna get you everything you can possibly need. So very well done, a very good product from PGYTech as we're used to expect now from them. And now back to my expectation on the X-Pro camera. As I mentioned, given that the X-E5 has gone way up in the food chain, so way up in specs, the X-Pro 5 or 4 or 6, whatever, needs to be kind of a special camera to actually appeal to people and make sense for the Fujifilm X system. So I expect them to come up with something really clever, but I don't expect that to be in the sensor. I would bet that the sensor on the camera is going to be the 40 megapixel sensor that we have on the X-E5, because that sensor is really good, and the X-Pro line is not supposed to be a video camera anyways, so the fact that the sensor has a slower readout, it's not a big deal. And also the fact that the sensor is not as video oriented as the 26 megapixel sensor is not a big deal either. So I would bet on that 40 megapixel sensor to be used in the camera. I would also bet that they will launch this new camera with their new processor, that it's kind of, I can take it for granted. But besides that, the camera needs to be a breath of fresh air, and given the target audience that Fujifilm is targeting, it probably needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, compared to the X-Pro3, of course, which is the last in line of the X-Pro cameras. And let's start with the defining feature of the X-Pro line. As I mentioned, I predicted that we would get rid of the hybrid viewfinder. At this point, I believe I was wrong. That is not going to happen. the hybrid viewfinder is going to stay. And since it's going to stay, they have to make it better. Because what they did with the X-Pro3 is that they oversimplified it. They got rid of the sliding glass that would help you have two different magnification, and they decided to stick with one magnification only that made the whole thing simpler, less prone to breaking. That is one of the reasons I believe. But also what that happened is that you wouldn't be able to use that type of viewfinder with slightly wider lenses. The X-Pro1 viewfinder with the larger magnification could be used up to a 14 millimeters, meaning 21 millimeters equivalent glass, and you would still be able to frame the entire thing with the optical viewfinder. But with the X-Pro3, that got changed to cover just from 80 millimeters up, so meaning from 28 millimeters up. Not only that, by doing that, if you were using a longer lenses, let's say a 35 or a 50 millimeters lens, which is the 50 f2 is basically the portrait lens that you would use in a camera like that, the magnification was going to be pretty small. Actually, the size of the frames into the optical viewfinder was going to be pretty small. While with the previous iteration of the X-Pro cameras, you had a higher magnification glass that would come in, make it everything larger, and then you could frame a little bit better with longer lens. If you're making that a defining feature, if you want to make this camera worth the hype that it's going to have and worth the price that it's going to have, and we're going to get to the price in a second, you need to go back to that type of design or come up with something different that makes it usable with the hybrid viewfinder with a larger set of lenses. And if they don't want to go that route, the only solution for me is to go back to the drawing board and come up with an electronic viewfinder only, but with a huge electronic viewfinder that is going to make it worth the difference between this and the X-E5. Also, speaking of the viewfinder, what I want to see, regardless of the direction Fujifilm wants to go, they need to implement the vintage viewfinder option of the X-E5. That would work perfectly fine with the EVF, but also with the optical viewfinder. I expect that to be part of the feature set of the new X-Pro line. Besides the viewfinder, from a physical standpoint, I expect the body to be a chunky body. It's going to be pretty much similar to the X-Pro3, maybe even a little bit bigger, depending on the features and the physical features that they want to add. I expect the new battery, the NP-W235, and so that may make the body just a little bit thicker to allow that battery to fit. I also expect the dual SD card slot for sure, and I expect the weather sealing. This is a given for me. What I want to see, however, I want to see a completely different LCD screen solution compared to the X-Pro3. That screen has to go and never have to come back. In my opinion, that was a test. It didn't come up good, and so forget about that, Fuji, and give us a screen that is at least with the articulation way of the X-E5, but even better, give us a screen that is similar to the articulation of the X-T5. Even the same screen of the X-T5 is pretty good, really good, with the same articulation. That needs to be a functional screen, and tilting up and down and sideways is the best way to do it. I also expect a relatively big joystick to help moving the autofocusing point, but I also expect an easy way to crop in and out given the 40 megapixel sensor. So we know that if they keep the hybrid viewfinder, the lever that the X-E5 is using to do the cropping is going to be used for the most part by the optical viewfinder mechanism, but they need to find a way to allow an easy push-in, push-out because of the resolution of the sensor. That is going to help getting closer when you only have a prime lens and you need to get to reach a little bit more. I want to see a custom dial setting very much like what we have on the X-E5 for the film simulation dial. I just want that to become a custom setting dial. I want to keep the same look of it because it's super sick, it's super beautiful. But for an X-Pro camera, I'd rather have that a custom setting dial in which you can store different recipe rather than a film simulation dial limited to just those. So I like the idea. It just needs to go up in specs with a custom dial setting. That would be super sick. Besides that, I would love to see internal ND filters because with the camera being a little bit bigger, I think they can fit that in there so that you have another camera with the feature set of the X106. That would be sick. And if they cannot fit it with a physical one, I would lean towards what Olympus is doing or OM System is doing with the electronic ND filter, something that you can simulate the ND filter so that you can use slower shutter speed without actually bringing filters with you. From a software standpoint, what I want to see is a brand new autofocusing system. Fujifilm needs to improve that. They need to get out of that bad press that they got ever since the autofocusing issues with the firmware updates came up. So they need that, and they need that to be working perfectly. There is no way they can keep the same system that they've had in the last 12 years, because at the end of the day, the system has been improved, but the guts of the system, I believe, have remained unchanged. So I hope this gap in the launch of high-end cameras is because they've been working on the autofocus system nonstop. I would hope that to be true. We'll see, but in my opinion, they need to come up with something new and something new that actually works. I would also like to see a hyperfocal mode, a very simple hyperfocal mode where at the touch of a button, the camera goes in hyperfocal mode. It selects everything for you, disabling the autofocusing system and go like hyperfocal, selecting the aperture, selecting all the other settings so that you don't have to think about it. It would be good not only for beginners, but also for experienced photographers that they have to change things in a matter of seconds. And sometimes if you're doing street, you may want to isolate your subject in a second and then all of a sudden something else happens and you want to go to hyperfocal. Having something like that would be great. Or at least having something like Ricoh GR where you basically full press without even waiting for the autofocus to lock, and it goes to a set focusing distance that in your opinion is the best for what you're doing. That would be sick, and that would be super useful for the type of camera that the X-Pro line wants to be. What I would also like to see is the presence of an auto subject detection setting. They did that in the XS20, but it was limited only to a certain use mode. I want that to become a standard as a subject detection setting in your normal autofocusing setup. That would be nice. Not a big deal, but if it's there, it's better. And when it comes to video, I just expect the same specs that the X-E5 has. I don't expect anything more. This is not a video camera, so I don't expect them to even worry about video that much. And now it's time to talk about the price, because we cannot forget about that. That, my friends, I believe is going to be pretty steep. The X-E5 got launched at a pretty steep price as well, and assuming that Fujifilm doesn't come up with a half-baked camera that try to keep the price low enough but doesn't get you anything really new, and I hope they don't go with that direction. If they come with something that is new, innovative, the way it should be, the way I expect them to do, this camera is not going to be priced at less than $2,500. That's my guess. It's going to be a steep price. And it's going to have a lot of people complain about it because it's going to be a price that many will consider that is too high. However, everything is going up, and it's going up dramatically nowadays. And if it stays at 2.5 and it doesn't get to $3,000, that would be already a big win. This is, of course, because a camera like the X-Pro is not going to be the mass production camera that it was when it was launched at first. The X-Pro has become a niche camera anyways, so niche cameras, they're nice to have. They get you the expectation that you can get to that camera at some point in your life, but the dark side of that is they cost a lot of money. And I have one last dream of mine, and that dream is seeing the new X-Pro camera being launched in a kit with a new version of the 18mm f2. I believe that lens deserves to be updated, deserves to be proposed to the public again, and I believe a camera like the X-Pro would be the perfect fit for a lens like that. My concern is that they don't make it a true pancake lens and make it 2.8. I hope they keep it f2 because that makes a difference. But that is a huge dream of mine. I would love to see that kit coming together all along. I believe that is it for today. I want to know what you think in the comments below. I hope this video wasn't too boring, too long. Let me know your expectation on the X-Pro, whatever number is going to be. Let me know if you think I'm crazy with the prediction that I made. Let me know if you like the idea of a camera that I came up with. Ciao, and I'll see you in the next one.